All right, more on the ministry of Elisha. And we looked at Gehazi last week, and the servant and Gehazi, and the healing of Naaman the leper. All right, so it was yet another miracle. So tonight we get into a couple other things that are going to be considered miracles here. First, in chapter 6. Verse 1, it says, "And the sons of the prophets said unto Elisha, Behold, now the place where we dwell with thee is too strait for us." So it looks like from here they were running out of room, which is always in the ministry. It's a good problem to have. It's not a fun problem to have, but it is a good problem to have. And the sons of the prophets were looking to do something different because of the where they dwelt. Was just being restrictive. And so they say in verse 2, "Let us go, we pray thee, unto Jordan, and take thence every man a beam, and let us make us a place there where we may dwell." And he answered, "Go ye." So they have a solution. They're going to build, and they just tell him, can we go? Can we go build this? At least they have a solution, which is good. And he says, and they say to him in verse 3, after he says to go, and one said, "Be content, I pray thee, and go with thy servants." And he answered, "I will go." So this is a good leader who will also get his hands dirty, will go with them, will be involved in the projects. So a good spiritual leader will be, if he's a hard worker in other areas of his life, then he'll be a hard worker in the ministry. If he's lazy in other areas of his life, he'll be lazy in the ministry. That just usually follows suit. If he's bad with finances in the personal, you don't want him in charge of the finances in the ministry. I mean, that's just the way things go, right? It follows you. So he shows himself to be, sure, I'll go. Let's go ahead and cut some trees down. Verse number 4, "So he went with them, and when they came to Jordan, they cut down wood. But as one was felling a beam," or not, cutting it down, "the axe head fell into the water. And he cried and said, Alas, master, for it was borrowed." Now, this person, this son of the prophet that was cutting down a tree with the axe, the axe head flew off into the water, so he lost it. And he said, "What am I going to do? It was borrowed." So you can see, again, the character of somebody. You can't just go down to the hardware store and, pick up another one, a Home Depot or something like that, right? And he's like, this was borrowed. Shows that he had respect for other people's property when he was upset about it, okay? Which is good to be that way. So it says, "And the man of God said, Where fell it? And he showed him the place. And he cut down a stick and cast it in thither, and the iron did swim." So here's a miracle for you, right? Here's a miracle for you. The iron started swimming. That would be cool to see. So instead of sinking down, which, it should have done, right? And so this is a miracle. The current didn't bring it in. It's, nature didn't help, okay? This defies all laws of physics, gravity, laws of nature, laws of buoyancy, whatever else you want to throw in there. It's a miracle, all right, that they were able to recover this. So now the picture here is this. It's interesting that he cut down a stick to save the iron, okay? Cut down a stick. So in other words, they cut off a branch, all right? That pictures Christ, all right? So Christ is called, well, wait a minute. I got to back up a little bit. I'm sorry I missed this because this is important. Exodus 22. Remember, the guy was upset because it was borrowed, right? It was borrowed. Here's a couple things in the law that talks about if you are a steward of somebody else's, you got to be a good steward, all right? So Exodus 22:10 says, "If a man deliver unto his neighbor an ass or an ox or sheep or any beast to keep it and die, or be hurt or driven away, no man seeing it, then shall an oath of the Lord be between them both, that he hath not put his hand unto his neighbor's goods. And the owner of it shall accept thereof, and he shall not make it good." In other words, it was just one of those things that happened, and it wasn't the guy's fault. All right? So, verse 12, and if it be stolen from him, he shall make restitution unto the owner thereof. So, if it's stolen under his watch, they should have been a little more attentive to it, then he's got to make restitution. If it be torn in pieces, then let him bring it for witness. He shall not make good that which was torn. Something attacked it. But it says, and if a man borrow aught of his neighbor, and it be hurt or die, the owner thereof being not with it, he shall surely make it good. So this is the prophet going, the son of the prophet saying, it was borrowed, knowing this principle, that you take care of people's property. So if you borrow a tool from somebody, don't be lazy, don't be ridiculous, don't be, slow to return it. I'm trying to figure out, somebody borrowed one of my commentaries a while ago, and I can't remember who. That's on me, though. All right, that's on me. So, but somebody didn't give me back my commentary. I know it wasn't Josiah. He's got his own set. So, but anyway, I was just thinking about that the other day. So, but if you borrow something from somebody, take good care of it. And if you lose it or it gets broken or whatever the case is, make it right. Make it right. That's the principle. All right. So back to the stick that got thrown into the water. All right. In Jeremiah 23:5, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will raise unto David a righteous branch and a king, and he shall prosper and shall execute judgment and justice in the earth. In his days Judah shall be saved, and Israel shall dwell safely. And this is his name whereby he should be called the Lord our righteousness. So Jesus Christ is called a branch. One of many names, right? But he's called a branch. In Daniel 9:26, it's also said that he's cut off. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. So he is a cut off branch. And what did they do to rescue the axe head? They cut off a branch, all right, and threw it into the water. Just a picture of Christ coming to the rescue, okay? So, anyway, it was one of those miracles that defied all of physics. So, all right, so back to our text here. And the iron swims. Everybody's happy. Verse 7, therefore said he, take it up to thee, and he put out his hand and took it. All right, another miracle from Elisha. All right, verse number 8. Then the king of Syria warred against Israel and took counsel with his servants, saying, in such and such a place shall be my camp. So this is the enemy of Israel. The king of Syria says, I'm going to reside here in the camp, in this location, whatever that was. And the man of God, this is Elisha, sent unto the king of Israel, saying, beware that thou pass not such a place, for thither the Syrians are come down. So he says to the king of Israel, avoid this area, because that's where they're hiding. Okay? In verse 10, and the king of Israel sent to the place which the man of God told him and warned him of, and saved himself there not once nor twice. So this was a continual thing that Elisha spared the king and the armies and said, don't go there. That's where the king of Syria is. Okay, well, after a while, the king of Syria now is going to be suspicious. There is a spy in the camp, right? How do they know this? How can they know this secret military operation, right? Verse 11, therefore the heart of the king of Syria was sore troubled for this thing, and he called his servants and said unto them, will ye not show me which of us is for the king of Israel? Who in this room is selling secrets? Who's the double agent? Who's telling the king where we are? In verse 12, one of his servants said, none, my lord, O king, but Elisha the prophet, that is in Israel, telleth the king of Israel the words that thou speakest in thy bedchamber. Somebody knew the power that Elisha had, that he possessed. Because they're like, hey, this guy will be able to tell what you're talking about when you're alone in your bedroom. He'll be able to communicate anything that you're thinking or what you're going to do. All right. And so that was just, it's a, again, it's the prophet. It's the, God's given him this ability to be able to know what's happening. I would hate to be around a person like that, where they'd be like, I know what you're thinking right now, one of those kinds of guys. But there's a few verses I want to bring to your attention. And one is in Psalm 25:14. The secret of the Lord is with them that fear him, and he will show them his covenant. So I'm not saying that any of this such thing that we're reading about tonight is going to happen to us, but I will say there is a principle of when you fear the Lord and you walk with the Lord, and the Lord gives you maybe more information than he might the common person. John 15, Jesus said this, henceforth I call you not servants, for the servant knoweth not what his Lord doeth, but I have called you friends, for all things that I have heard of my Father, I have made known unto you. And so, again, special privileges, given of the Lord to people that fear him as servants. This is an interesting verse, Ecclesiastes 10:20. Curse not the king, no, not in thy thought, and curse not the rich in thy bedchamber, for a bird of the air shall carry the voice, and that which hath wings shall tell the matter. Now, we get out of this, right? What's our saying we get out of this? A little bird told me, right? That's where this comes from. A little bird told me. So, it's interesting. I'm not going to tell you that I understand how that works, but I think the principle being, and we all should know this from human nature, right? When you say something and you think it's a secret, a lot of times it's not a secret, is it? Okay? So to be careful of the words. But in this particular case, with Elisha, there's something more going on, that he is able to read the thoughts of the king and know what's going on, or God communicated to him. And also the principles being that God, with the people that fear him, if you fear the Lord, you're on the Lord's side. You're immersed in the Word of God. You're the servant of Jesus Christ. Yeah, you're probably going to get a little more, you're going to get more of an edge than the average person. You're going to get some discernment and that kind of a thing, to be able to discern between good and evil and which way to go and which way not to go. And, the Lord will give you the guidance and direction that you need. All right, so back to our text in verse 12 then. He says, no, Elisha is the one that knows what he's like as good as there, even in your bedchamber. In verse 13 it says, and he said, go and spy where he is, that I may send and fetch him. And it was told him, saying, behold, he is in Dothan. So they find out where he is. The king says, all right, I'm going to go after him now. I'm going to get him. He has given away the military secrets. This is not good for us. Let's go get him and arrest him and whatever they're going to do to him. Therefore sent he thither horses and chariots and a great host, and they came by night and compassed the city about. So the horses and chariots of the king and all the armies, they surround the city of Dothan where Elisha is. And when the servant of the man of God was risen early and gone forth, behold, an host compassed the city, both with horses and chariots. And his servant said unto him, alas, my master, how shall we do? So the servant gets up or whatever and walks outside or whatever he did, and all of a sudden the king's armies are surrounding them. And he says, what are we going to do? What does it look? I mean, it looks pretty hopeless. They're surrounded by a whole army, horses and chariots, and soldiers. In verse 16, Elisha, he says, he answered, fear not, for they that be with us are more than they would be with them. All right, well, on the surface, that wasn't true. It was probably the two of them, maybe a few others, who knows how many. But he says, oh, we've got more than they do. And the servant at this point has got to be like, what are you talking about? I'm glad you're confident. Are you okay? So I would think of the verse in 1 John 4 when we seem like we're outgunned, outnumbered, all those things. Ye are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. And he says, those that are with us, don't worry, are more than those that are with them. All right, we can use that principle as well. So here's what Elisha does here. It says, and Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see. Now, he wasn't blind. He could physically see. But Elisha says, Lord, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. So what he couldn't see was the spiritual realm that was surrounding them, horses and chariots of fire, that God had them covered, okay? He had his army there in place. So that's what he saw. Open his eyes so that he may see. Well, what did he see? He saw the spiritual realm. That's what he saw. All right? So his eyes had to be open spiritually to see this. Okay? Now, on normal average, we don't see that. We're not supposed to see that apparently, but this was a special thing for him. But at any given time, if you think about this, at any given time, there is present with us the Spirit of the Lord, which you don't see, the spirit of Antichrist, which you can't see, or the spirit of the world, which you can't see. In your own spirit, which you can't see. Okay? There's a spiritual realm that's around us at any given time. Okay? So when we look at that, we look at the verses that talk about spiritual warfare, spiritual realm, other instances too where God opened people's eyes. But you have 2 Corinthians 10 reminds us, though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh. Remember, they're surrounded with physical armies of war. But Elisha's like, that's not what we're going to do. We don't need that. We don't war after the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, Paul says, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, pulling down those strongholds that have a stranglehold on us spiritually. Okay, spiritually. So it's prayer that helps us with that. You know the verse in Ephesians 6, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood. That's not our fight, right? But against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. So our battle, our fight is in the spiritual realm. So when he says, Lord, open his eyes, what's he opening his eyes to? The spiritual realm that's out there, all right? Now, our eyes aren't going to get open like that, but we have the Word of God that tells us that these are the things that go on around us, okay? We should know that there's spiritual warfare. We should know from this that there's principalities, powers, rulers of the darkness, spiritual wickedness. All of that is around us at any given time, okay? So these are just good reminders of the spiritual realm, the spirit world. The spirit world is very real. The spirit world is very real. We don't necessarily think that because it's not in front of our face. We don't see it, all right? So a couple other things. We've touched on this, I think, before, but just an example, right? Daniel was praying to God for help, and the angel that was coming to help him got held up for 3 weeks in a spiritual fight. And he explains that to Daniel. All right, again, the stuff we don't see that goes on. All right, this being, heavenly being, angel said, "Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand, and to chasten thyself before thy God, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words." Your prayer was heard, Daniel. "But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I remained there with the kings of Persia." Michael the archangel came to help him fight against the spiritual realm of the kingdom of Persia, which, by the way, at the time, Persia was the world power. So the world power had its own principalities and spiritual rulers of darkness and the whole thing, okay? "Then there came again and touched me one like the appearance of a man, and he strengthened me and said, O man, greatly beloved, fear not. Peace be unto thee, and be strong. Yea, be strong. And when he had spoken unto me, I was strengthened, and said, Let my Lord speak, for thou hast strengthened me. Then said he, Knowest thou wherefore I come unto thee? And now will I return to fight with the prince of Persia. And when I am gone, lo, the prince of Greece shall come." You know who the next world power was after Persia? Greece. So again, the world power has, its own demons, angels, whatever you want to call it, fallen angels. So they're going to fight. They're going to fight against God's angels, against God's army. So it can interfere with spiritual things, okay? "But I will show thee that which is noted in the scripture of truth, and there is none that holdeth with me in these things, but Michael your prince." Michael, the archangel, Michael the prince, he's kind of assigned to the nation of Israel. All right, I show you all this to tell you, Daniel would have never known that, and we would have never known that unless an angel came from heaven and told him those things, as to what was happening behind the scenes, right? So think about it. What's happening when we pray behind the scenes? What's happening when we pray and fast behind the scenes? There's probably some intense warfare going on that we don't even know about, all right? That maybe is getting interfered. Maybe our prayers are being hindered. Maybe our prayers are being interfered with by the enemy. I don't know. I don't know that I'm that important, but I'm saying somewhere, at least in government or this or that, something's happening in the spiritual realm that's hindering prayers or delaying prayers or whatever the case is. All right, so that's the spiritual warfare. Lord, open his eyes that he may see. This is the stuff that he couldn't see. Same thing in Genesis 3, way back in the Garden of Eden. The devil says to Eve, right, "For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." Their eyes weren't open at that point to good and evil, all right? "And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons." They didn't know it before because they didn't know good or evil. They didn't know. They just, all of a sudden now, their eyes were open. And they're like, we're in sin, So that's what happened in the garden. Now, this is, this is about Ishmael's mother Hagar when Abraham sent them away. And the child was they were in the wilderness, and the little boy Ishmael, he was going to die. And it says in Genesis 21:16, as she went in and sat down over against him a good way off, as it were a bow shot, for she said, "Let me not see the death of the child." And she sat over against him and lifted up her voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the lad. And the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven and said unto her, "What aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thine hand, for I will make him a great nation. And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. And she went and filled the bottle with water and gave the lad drink. I would imagine that that well of water was there the whole time. She couldn't see it. All right? And God opened her eyes to it. And she got able to drink out of it and sustain her and her son and all those things. Okay? So then you have, remember Balaam and Balaam's donkey? Remember that whole thing? And he's riding the donkey, and the donkey sees the angel of the Lord, and Balaam doesn't see the angel of the Lord, and the donkey smacks him over against the wall. He smashes his foot against the wall, so he doesn't go. The angel of the Lord is standing there with a sword ready to kill him. And then he smacks his donkey, and and then the thing starts talking. So that's an interesting one. Numbers 22. Then the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way and his sword drawn in his hand. And he bowed down his head and fell flat on his face. Balaam couldn't see it before. The donkey could, but Balaam couldn't. And then God opened his eyes, and he saw the spiritual realm. And the angel of the Lord said unto him, Wherefore hast thou smitten thine ass 3 times? Behold, I went out to withstand thee, because thy way is perverse before me. And the ass saw me and turned from me these 3 times. Unless she had turned from me, surely now also I had slain thee and saved her alive. He said, I would have killed you. I would have spared the ass. And Balaam said unto the angel of the Lord, I have sinned, for I knew not that thou stoodest in the way against me. Now therefore, if it displease thee, I will get me back again. But again, it goes back to God had to open his eyes. So just as we can't see our soul and our spirit, we can't see those things. Okay? There's a whole kingdom out there, a whole warfare that goes on out there that we can't see, but that we know is around us. Now, I don't know. I suppose, in my opinion, I think there's I think people who hallucinate on drugs and trip out their mind and see things, I think that they're just they unveiled the spiritual realm. That's what I think. That's why I think they go so nuts, right? Because it alters your mind, right? The mind is spiritual, right? So you start going into some of these drugs and stuff, and you start seeing things or hallucinating, whatever. It could very well be that they've gotten the curtain pulled back to a spiritual realm, and they're freaking out. That we're apparently not supposed to see. We're supposed to be aware of it, but God doesn't allow us to see it. What would happen if he allowed us to see it? Wouldn't you freak out too? Yeah, that'd be pretty scary, wouldn't it? To see the forces of evil and the forces of good battling each other, manifest. Again, those things, the things that were demonic were manifest in the time of Christ. We see some of that now that are manifest. But the stuff behind the scenes just, I don't think some of that we're really supposed to see. In fact, I know we're not supposed to see it. All right? That's just the way God designed it. So that's why he says, don't mess with things like that. Because you're not ready for it, or you're not strong enough, or you're not supposed to, or whatever the case. And this is why he would say things like this to his people. From Deuteronomy 18, he would say things like, Deuteronomy 18:9, when thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abomination of those nations. Those nations were satanic. Don't do like they did. There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, child sacrifice, or that useth divination, right? Divine divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. He's like, I don't want you to do this stuff. Okay? Don't play with that stuff. All right? Don't do that. So it's plain and simple that it's in another realm, and it's just not supposed to be something we see unless God is going to unveil it for us, like he did here for reasons that I showed you in these texts. He did that. He allowed it. But for the most part, no, he's not going to do that. All right, so back to 2 Kings 6. In verse 17, then, he sees the mountain full of horses, chariots, fire round about Elisha. And when they came down to him, Elisha prayed unto the Lord and said, smite this people, I pray thee, with blindness. And he smote them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. So he prays and says, Lord, these armies, make them blind, that they can't see. He had a plan. So while his servant had his eyes open to the spiritual realm, these guys are going to have their eyes closed to the physical realm. And Elisha said unto them, this is not the way, neither is this the city. Follow me, and I will bring you to the man whom you seek. But he led them to Samaria. He's going to lead them to the capital of Israel, in enemy territory. But he says to them, I can't imagine the scene when they all go blind. They all go blind. That's got to be chaotic. And so they're looking for guidance, direction, this, that, and Elisha says, follow me, I'll take you where you want to go. But he was lying to them. That's not it's not at all what he was going to do, okay? So, one of those lies that God lets happen. And the higher cause is always to be protected. The higher cause is to be protected. Answer not a fool, answer a fool at times. And the higher cause is to be protected, as we've talked about, smuggling Bibles into, China, Russia, wherever you would have to lie to do that. The higher cause is to be protected. So he says, come this way, and I'll take you where you want to go. But he didn't. He took them to the enemy territory of Samaria. And it came to pass, when they were come into Samaria, that Elisha said, Lord, open the eyes of these men that they may see. And the Lord opened their eyes, and they saw, and behold, they were in the midst of Samaria, enemy territory. And the king of Israel said unto Elisha, when he saw them, my father, shall I smite them? Shall I smite them? He's got the enemies right at his front door. Should we kill them all? Now Elisha was a lot like Jesus Christ. And he says, we're going to do no such thing. And he answered, thou shalt not smite them. Wouldest thou smite those whom thou hast taken captive with thy sword and with thy bow? Set bread and water before them, that they may eat and drink and go to their master. All right, so he says, no, you're not going to kill them. Treat them well. The Geneva Convention, whatever it is, for treat the prisoners of war, right? So, verse 23, I know that because I watch Hogan's Heroes. That's it, the Geneva Convention. Verse 23, I couldn't even tell you what that was. Verse 23, and he prepared great provision for them, and when they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away. And they went to their master, so the bands of Syria came no more into the land of Israel. Now, it wasn't that Syria didn't come back into the land. They did, but these particular bands he sent away, never to return again. So there's a reason, too, I think, that he spared them. They could have slaughtered them and all that. But way back with King Ahab, the sins are always, passed down to the sons and all that. When Ahab, in 1 Kings 20, had the upper hand on the king of Syria, Ben-Hadad, he let him go. And the Lord said, that's going to cost you. And then this is where it's costing him, right here. So that's 1 Kings 20. Ben-Hadad said, the cities which my father, they're making up. Ben-Hadad and Ahab are making up. They were at war. The cities which my father took from thy father I will restore, and thou shalt make streets for thee in Damascus, as my father made in Samaria. Then said Ahab, I will send thee away with this covenant. So he made a covenant with him and sent him away. Wasn't supposed to make a covenant with the king of Syria. This was Ahab the king. All right? And so the prophet comes along, disguises himself with ashes, and gives an illustration when the king walked by. Said, thy servant went out in the midst of battle, and behold, a man turned aside and brought a man unto me and said, keep this man
If by any means he be missing, then shall thy life be for his life, or else thou shalt pay a talent of silver. And as thy servant was busy here and there, he was gone. And the king of Israel said unto him, so shall thy judgment be. Thyself hath decided. He goes, what do I care? You made the commitment. You made the covenant. You should have taken care of this person. Then the prophet, he hastened and took away the ashes away from his face, and the king of Israel discerned that he was of the prophets. And he said unto him, thus saith the Lord, because thou hast let go out of thy hand a man whom I appointed to utter destruction, therefore thy life shall go for his life, and thy people for his people. And in 2 Kings now, Ahab's dead and gone, but in 2 Kings, we're starting to see that, okay? Because he didn't do what God told him to do, and this is a result of it. So, Syria, they leave, but then they come back stronger, and then the rest of the chapter is bad for Israel. All right, so verse 24, it says, and it came to pass after this that Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, gathered all the hosts and went up and besieged Samaria. It doesn't say how long it was after, but he comes back and takes Samaria, the capital. And there was a great famine in Samaria, and behold, they besieged it until an ass's head was sold for 80 pieces of silver, 80 pieces of silver for a donkey head to eat, and a fourth part of a cab of dove's dung for 5 pieces of silver. This is starvation, man. They were even buying dung, for nourishment, I think. I don't know. But I don't know why else you would pay for that. But they were paying for an ass's head. All right, so this wasn't good. This was like whatever. I mean, when I was in second grade, and it wasn't the Depression by any means. I'm not that old, but it was. There was a boy who was a farmer, and he was eating his lunch. And I said, "What you got there? What you eating?" He goes, "Oh, this is cow's tongue." I go, "What? Cow's tongue? You eat cow's tongue?" And I couldn't believe that. I still remember that to this day in the second grade. He's eating cow's tongue. So people will eat what they got to eat to take, So, I mean, the Italians eat tripe, You know what tripe is, right? Yeah. So the inside of the cow's muscle lining. Now, I've never eaten it, but my brother loves it, right? So there's just things that people eat, that are weird. Lydia, me and Steve, her dad, took Lydia. I took her out for her birthday to Rocky's Italian restaurant in the city to give her the experience, the old mafia mentality. All right, so her dad ordered tripe. You didn't know what it was, did you? Her dad's eating tripe, and he says, "Lydia, taste this, it's good." She knows her father very well. She said, "What is it?" He says, "It's tripe." "Yeah, but what is it?" She knew. He was trying to get her to eat the cow's stomach, right? I'm like, "Lydia, don't worry, I would have told you." So, but I think of the things that people will just eat. I don't know, at some point, and tripe is pretty popular across the world, but at some point, it wasn't the America that we knew, that's prosperity and you can get whatever you want, right? People were eating, cow's tongues and stomach lining of animals and all that. But here, it's desperation as they're buying an ass's head and cab of dove's dung, all right? Verse 26, and as the king of Israel was passing by upon the wall, there cried a woman unto him, saying, "Help, my lord, O king." And he said, "If the Lord did not help thee, when shall I help thee? Out of the barn floor, out of the winepress? Because I've got nothing for you. How am I supposed to help you?" And you can see now that his attitude is, if the Lord won't help you, that this judgment is from God, okay? And that's a good question, by the way. If the Lord do not help thee, how am I going to help thee? And that's a great question. We need God first before anyone can help. And the king said unto her, what aileth thee? And she answered, this woman said unto me, give thy son that we may eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow. That's disgusting. But it's cannibalism. That's how bad it was. Okay? People do desperate things when they're hungry. You know, you say, well, I never did. I remember, man, was it back in the 70s or something when there was that plane crash in Argentina? And those people cooked the dead people, and that's how they survived in the mountains, in the snow and all that. But, so she says, okay, I can't even imagine this. But cannibalism, eating, I mean, that's a form of, it's a form of satanic Baalism worship. That's not why they were doing it, I'm sure, but that's what it is. So we boiled my son and did eat him. And I said unto her on the next day, give thy son that we may eat him. And she hath hid her son. Yeah. This is horrible. This is horrible. Now, folks, I hope we're raptured out before it happens, and I don't know how much bad we're going to see, but man, oh man, there's going to be things like this going on in the tribulation period. Okay? Now, I don't know if it's going to happen before the tribulation period either, if things are going to get that bad, but cannibalism, people eating people, okay? It wouldn't be the first time, and history repeats itself. This is also these are things that God had warned Israel about way back in Deuteronomy. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee if they disobeyed him. Okay? If you don't keep my commandments. Verse 48, therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which the Lord shall send against thee in hunger and in thirst, and in nakedness and in want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he have destroyed thee. The Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand, a nation fierce of countenance, which shall not regard the person of the older, nor show favor to the young. And he shall eat the fruit of thy cattle, the fruit of thy land, until thou be destroyed, which also shall not leave thee either corn, wine, or oil, or the increase of thy kind, or flocks of thy sheep, until they have destroyed thee. That's exactly the tactic is going on in this text from Syria. They're starving them out. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates until thy high and fenced walls come down, wherein thou trustest, throughout all thy land. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates throughout all thy land, which the Lord thy God giveth thee. And thou shalt eat the fruit of thine own body. There it is. Thou shalt eat the fruit of thine own body, the flesh of thy sons and of thy daughters, which the Lord thy God hath given thee in the siege and in the straitness, wherewith thine enemies shall distress thee. This was warned way back in Deuteronomy, where he said, listen, if you don't hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God to keep his commandments, statutes, which he commanded thee, this stuff's going to happen to you. And that's exactly what we see in this text, is they were just disobedient, non-spiritual people, and eating each other's, eating children. Verse 30 of our text, and it came to pass when the king heard the words of the woman that he rent his clothes. He passed by upon the wall, and the people looked, and behold, he had sackcloth within upon his flesh. That's just a sign of renting your clothes, of just so discouraged and down, and sackcloth and ashes, and trying to humble yourself. But then he gets angry, and he said, God, do so and more also to me, if the head of Elisha, the son of Shaphat, shall stand on him this day. So he says, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to kill the prophet. He's mad at God, undoubtedly. And God's representative is going to he's going to want him to take the brunt. He's the closest thing he can get to being mad at God is to kill the prophet, okay? So he blames Elisha. Maybe he's blaming Elisha for letting the Syrians go free back earlier in the chapter. Shall I smite them? Shall I smite them? Now we're going to feed them. We're going to let them go. You leave them alone. Maybe he's mad at that. I mean, I could understand why he'd be mad at that, because they come back in and they besiege him and starve him out. But it's interesting that when people get mad at God, the last person they want to talk to is any of God's representatives, okay? Listen, I know better than at times to try to reproach people. People who are mad at God, they don't want to talk to me. They just associate me with God, they'll do it with you if you're a good Christian, right? They do it with you too. But they're like, I don't want to hear about any of that stuff. I'm so mad right now at God. Get away from me. This guy's so mad he's going to kill the prophet. He wants to kill him. So he blames him. Verse 32, it says, but Elisha sat in his house, and the elders sat with him, and the king sent a man from before him. But ere the messenger came to him, he said to the elders. Now again, this is Elisha knows this stuff that's happening. See ye how this son of a murderer has sent to take away mine head? Look, when the messenger cometh, shut the door and hold him fast at the door. Is it not the sound of his master's feet behind him? Elisha knew that the king was going to come for his head. And he's sitting there and he says to the guys, you hear this guy coming? The son of the murderer had sent him. By the way, he's calling him the son of a murderer. He's Ahab's son. Ahab was a bad king, and he was a murderer. And he said, this son of a murderer is coming for my head right now. So they take him, they intercept him. Elisha sits there, probably calm, cool, and collected. Hey, guys, this guy's coming to behead me. But, hey, do me a favor. Just grab him when he comes in, will you? So they do. And he says in verse 33, and while he yet talked with them, behold, the messenger came down unto him, and he said, behold, this evil is of the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer? Again, this evil is of the Lord. In other words, what on Elisha's end, what do you want me to do about it? And on the other king's end, the king's end, he's like, I want to kill you. That's what I want to do. But it really comes down to it. It's the Lord's judgment. It's the Lord's judgment. Well, it wasn't Elisha's fault, So anyway, so what we're going to see next time is these tables are going to turn, and the Lord's going to intervene, and the Lord's going to defeat the enemy. He's going to defeat the enemy, and the famine is going to be over quick, because God's going to take care of Syria for the nation of Israel. All right. So there's just another chapter on the ministry of Elisha, and it's interesting when you just watch. You're going, let's cut down some trees and do a building project. You get in, look inside of a building project, and we lost the axe head. I mean, the tools are broken. You just get kind of an inside look there, and then you get an inside look at being raided by the enemy, and then having to, the Lord to intervene in the spiritual warfare, and then, of course, to the end with the famine. But an interesting life that the prophets led. It's quite a broad life, quite a variety of things that happened to them, from everyday living to the broader things of dealing with kings and dealing with enemies and, people that love you, people that hate you, and, the whole thing. So, all right, we're going to stop there. That's chapter 6. We're off next week. Come back in a couple weeks. We'll do chapter 7 and see how the tide turns here. All right.